This is Alida and Laan, and it's the 20th of March, about 10 o'clock in the morning. So, how much, you don't even have to look at the camera. How much education have you received? Like, what schools did you go to?
Okay, I went to grade school in Berkhout in the Netherlands. And during the war, there was not too much, the last years was not too much education because the teachers were either underground or couldn't work, and the schools were cold in the wintertime. So I had about a seventh grade education at grade school. And after grade school, I went to a home ec school that was particularly geared to agricultural children that lived on farms. And it was a school that had a term of 3 years. You learned mostly what pertained to the farm household, like cooking, sewing, washing, something about the animals, like on the farm. And that was taught by an agricultural teacher. And in that class, we had a lot of fun because lots of things happened with the girls, and they tried to talk us into being a housewife when you was 14 or 15 years old. It was for us a long time away.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's what we learned then. It was good for that time, but time has changed so much that, we washed by hand and on a washboard because there were hardly no washing machines. And then now you just put it in and take it out, and the wash is done. And but basics, I learned a lot because I learned how to cook, how to bake, and how to clean house and how to take care of what an average housewife did, and also sewing and needlework. And that was really my big thing that I went to the school to learn how to sew and how to do needlework. And when I graduated from that school, I was 17. I went to a home tailoring school, and it was taught by two teachers, and they learned you how to make your own pattern, how to make, cut it out and sew it, and then there was different degrees. You had your first degree was basic sewing, and then I went into tailoring, which was another 2 years, and I got my exam for that, and was majored in tailoring and needlework. And after that, I then took some work in from different people to make a blouse, make a skirt, and do this, do that, make curtains and interior design. But it was all done in my mother's living room. And she was not always too pleased with all the mess that was around in the living room because the living room was not that big. So I went to a store who asked for somebody to work in the material department. And that was just cotton, some wool, and everything you would see in a store would sell that stuff. And I enjoyed that. I like to work with different people. You went home and you didn't have any other work to do at night anymore. You just went back in the morning and you were done at 5:30 or 6 o'clock. And that's about what I did before I was married.
That was the sewing school that you had the diploma from?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. What was growing up in Holland like?
What was it growing up like?
Yeah.
Well, I was the oldest of 5 children, so I had 4 brothers.
Mm-hmm.
I lived on a farm. At first it was just mainly agriculture, like potatoes and cabbages and tulips and all that. Now later on my father switched over to a dairy farm, and we lived on a dairy farm, and I enjoyed that. It was nice. I didn't have to do much on the dairy farm. I helped out once in a while when the cows had to be driven somewhere else. But mainly I helped my mother when I was home in my free time, if I didn't have to go to school to work, because she was busy with 5 children. And the youngest one was 16 and a half years older than I was, so he was just like a little baby when I was 16. And so I was almost like his second mother. and he always called me the other mama. So, and what it was during the war, it was difficult sometimes. We were not directly in what you call a war. We were occupied by Germany, and the Germans took different buildings to have a place to live. Like at the end of the war, they wanted to have part of the school, and they had occupied other different buildings in town. At home, we were fiercely, what you would call probably over here, royalists. We were very much against the Germans. We did everything we could do to hamper them in their effort. First of all, my dad had the farm, and he always had some hired help. And one time, one of the hired help had a cousin, and he came back from Germany because he worked in the ammunition factories in Lübeck, in Germany. And he, he really wanted to get out of that. He was pushed into forced labor. But when he wanted to go back to home for a week vacation, the Germans took his money and his clothes, and he could go home for a visit. But he would get everything back if he would come back to the ammunition factory. Well, he thought he would never go back there because the Allies were starting to bomb Germany, and he knew what was going to happen. They bombed those factories. So he stayed in our town, but he really didn't have a place to go. So the one guy who worked for my dad said, "Oh, my cousin would like to have a place to live and like to have some work." So he asked my dad, and my dad said, "Well, I'm not the only one to say yes." He said, "Just go ask and talk to my wife." So he talked to my mother. And this guy was a very nice young man, and he said, "Well, okay." He said, my mother said, "Okay, if you help me with the household a little bit here and there, like peeling potatoes and sweeping the sidewalk and things like that, you could stay here." But they really put their lives in danger.
They were aware of what
He
his
was
situation
the
was.
underground,
But they were aware of that.
Pardon?
Your parents were aware
Oh,
of
yes,
that.
yes, they were aware of that. But there were lots of people who done it, and sometimes you had bad luck and they picked those people up. But he worked on the farm, and he was a very enjoyable man. He played the accordion. We had lots of fun with him. He played at different birthday parties in the neighborhood and played at wedding anniversaries. And he stayed with us for about 3 years. He stayed 2 years during the war, but then another year he was so incorporated in this area where we lived that everybody knew him. So he stayed another year with the family. And I always kept very close contact with my parents because he felt like that was another set of parents. And to me, he was like an older brother. And when Opa and I got married, he said, "I'll rent a car." Now that might be funny over here. "I'll rent a car and I'll drive you to the city hall and to the church, and it will be my expense, at my expense." And he did. He did do that. He drove us to the city hall and then drove us back to the church, and then we went to a little tour in the village. And always he wrote, his wife wrote letters to us. They came over for our 25th wedding anniversary in America, and always been very close to the family after that.
Didn't the SS come once, or the Nazis?
Well, they have knocked on the door one time. They was not the SS. There were people who were looking for other men, and they were on the German side.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother had told me, I was in the house, and there was people told, "You better hide because the Germans are coming." They knew that. So my dad went with the other two boys to the field, and they were way back in the field. And then when my mother said, "You better start peeling the potatoes," I heard noises under the kitchen floor. And I said to my mother, "There's people in the hiding place," because that is where the boy who was in the underground who lived with us stayed when there was danger. My mother had made a little bed over there, and the Germans would come. He would crawl in the crawl space and be there and come back when it's safe.
Mm-hmm.
And so my mother said, yeah, don't say anything. If the Germans come, don't say anything. Just keep on peeling the potatoes. And pretty soon there was a knock on the door. And they asked my mother if she had any of the men folks at home. And my mother said, no, they're working in the field. And then he just said, well, you know what happens if you find somebody? But my mother said, there's nobody there. You can look everywhere. They're in the field. And then they left again. But then later on, I seen that my neighbor and another guy from the other account came out of the crawl space. It was dangerous, but everybody else did it. You know, they didn't want them in.
Did they go out to the field?
Then they go back to their house because then
No,
was closed. Yeah.
Did the Germans go out to the field?
No. They stayed on the main street. They tried to pick up as many as they could, but most of them were gone already before they came there because there was always underground who were looking what are they going to do.
And then also, didn't you hear like bombers going over at night and stuff like that? And
Yeah, in the last years of the war, every night about 9 o'clock or so, you could hear the planes go, and there were many planes who flew over our towns and village. And when I was laying in bed, you could hear them. And, you know, after half an hour or 45 minutes, it was over. But then after 15 minutes or so, they came back and went back to England again. And one time, you know, sometimes planes got hit or whatever, something went wrong. And one night, on a Saturday night, I could hear a plane go. We were in bed already, but a plane went over real low. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, what is this? And my mother came up the stairs and she said, I think there's a plane going to fall down. And by that time, there was a big hit. And it was about maybe a mile and a half or so away from her home. That plane came down in the field.
in your field?
No, not in my field. It was way on the other end of the village.
So what was it like when the war ended and
When the war ended,
when the
occupation was over.
when the occupation ended? What was it like when that happened?
Well, that day I still remember because everybody, we knew that the end was near. You know, they had to give up. And the southern part of Holland was already free. It was below the Rhine rivers where the occupation happened. The Americans came in from Belgium, and then they fought over by the Rhine River, and then they went into Germany. But the northern part of the Netherlands was still occupied by the Germans, and that was in the winter of '45. And that was the hardest time of the war because everybody was running out of food. And so finally, we had enough to eat because we lived on a farm. But my mother had to cook the food on a little stove with little pieces of wood, so you had a hot fire, so she could cook something real fast because there was no wood anymore either.
Mm-hmm.
You had to steal the trees along the road, and they did. My dad went out and he at night, in the middle of the night, with the boat. He had a big boat that held about 3 tons, and they brought it through a lane, a road that was there. There were all big trees, and him and a couple of neighbors, they cut a tree down. My dad knew exactly what tree he was going to get because it was close to his field, and they loaded it up, the trunks of trees, and they brought it home early in the morning, and then they had wood, but the wood was wet, so it didn't hardly burn. You had to put. It was hard on the. How my mother did it, I don't know, but every wife did it. They always had a meal on the table.
So when did you meet Reinder Laan?
Reinder Laan? I met him, let's see, when I was 18 years old.
Was that before the war?
That was after the war. Yeah. The war was over in 1945, and I was 13 then. So I met him. I had heard about him because my friend Aaf Laan had a second cousin that she talked about who had been in Indonesia, And she said her parents went to see his parents because he came home and they had a visit. And she said, oh, my mom said he was such a nice boy. He got nice things from Indonesia and he all over him. But I was really not that interested. So we had a carnival in town, and the senior soccer players had a game, and they were playing Opa's team. And I said to my mother, I'd like to see that because some of the comedians in town were playing in that game, and that was going to be fun. I knew that. And she said, well, you really have to babysit your brother, but if you want to see that game, just go ahead and then be home on time. So I went and I was watching the football, the soccer players, and all of a sudden one guy said, who is that boy? And they said, oh, that is Reinder Laan. He just came back from Indonesia. And I thought, oh, that's him. So, and but I had to go home again after the game, and I went home after the game, and my mom and dad were walking towards the cafe because there was a big party. And my mom said, well, if you really like to go, she said, your brother is home and he's studying because he was at high school, in high school. And she said, he'll take care of the kids, you know. So if you want to go for a while, you can go. So I went back in the cafe, and there was a big dance and a band playing. And my girlfriend was sitting with her boyfriend on the table, and that boyfriend was Papa's friend. And so I walked up and I thought, oh, there he is again. So I got introduced to him, and we danced a couple of times, and my mother and her friends were all sitting there, and all of a sudden she done like this. And I went over to her, and she said, who is that boy you're dancing with? Oh, I said, it's a cousin from our house. I said, I don't know. But he brought me home that night on a date, and later on, just had a couple other dates, and that was it.
So what was your wedding like?
My wedding. Well, let's see. It was just a very simple wedding, really. It was mostly family. And we got married in the city hall first. You have to get married in front of the authorities, of the mayor. And so you have, they call that a civil wedding over here, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And so you get married over there. And so you're already married. And then you go to the church. And by the time we came out of the city hall, all my friends from the gymnastics club and stood outside and in the gymnastic clothes, and then so just to greet me and say, congratulations, I think. Then we went into the church. I didn't have no bridesmaids. I just had two little boys, and that was my youngest brother and the son of Opa's brother, and they were both 3 and 4 years old, and they were the little flower boys, you could say. Instead of flower girls, I had two flower boys. And then we had a service in the church, got married, and then we had a reception and there was a cafe where we met right across the church in Holland. A lot of the cafes are right across from the church. Why, I don't know, but it's true.
I know that.
Because they want to drink after the church, right? And so we had a nice wedding, a reception, and then after that was over, we went to my parents' home, and they had like a broodtafel. That means just bread and meat and lunch meat and salads for sure, and then they had like a drink before the dinner, and then they had coffee after the broodmaaltijd, and then the family went home. And
I went home.
no, we had we had our wedding night in my bedroom next to my parents' bedroom.
Don't
And that is it. So we didn't have a house when we were married because he wanted to go to the United States because his brother was there, and there is a more opportunity over here for farming than it was in Holland. So in order to become eligible to immigrate to the United States, you had to go to the embassy, and all your papers had to be in order. So we done everything we did. It was in August when we had to go to the embassy, and everything was done. And then all of a sudden, the judge, you had to swear allegiance to the United States. There's a judge. And she said, but you're not married. And I said, I know we're not married, because if we get married, and if we were not qualified to go to the United States, we had to find a house, and it was, that was hard luck, because it took you 2 years maybe or more to find a house or a rented house where you could live. Everybody was on the list because there's so many people, and there was damage in the war. Nothing was done for 5 years, no building, nothing was going on. Population grew a little bit, and there was a tremendous shortage in housing. So the only thing was, if we were married, we had to live with our parents. And that is not a good idea.
Yeah.
So my dad said, before you do anything, he said, do it before you get married. If it doesn't work out, then at least you're not married. You each have your own home in the family. So what happened is, then she said, you're not married, and she said, you can come back when you're married, and then we'll give you your papers, and then everything will be okay. We could only go as man and wife to the States. So then on the 5th of December, I never forget it, was the St. Nicholas Day. We had to go to the Hague and go there, and we were done in about a half an hour over there. Swear that we would be the citizen and then everything. And we were
Physical sickness.
yeah, and physical. I had to go for a doctor's exam. I had to go to the room, and then there were a couple of American doctors in the embassy that looked me over and see whether I was perfectly right and that I was a healthy person. And then so it's almost like when they used to go to Ellis Island, people were all checked, but they were checked in the United States, and then they send them back. Now they were a little wiser. They checked them in the country of origin, and then send them.
So that was the embassy at the Hague?
Yeah, it's Hague, yeah.
You mentioned the gymnastic club. What was that all about?
Huh?
The gymnastic club, what was that all about?
Gymnastics, Olympia.
Oh, the gymnastic club? Well, the gymnastic club is, that was just a group where I belonged with since I was 3 years old. It was exercises, and you did work on the equipment, like on the bridge and on the, huh? Well, it's just like a sports club in college or something, or in high school, whatever.
But you were in it since you were 3?
What?
You were in it since you were 3?
There's a little toddler.
And it was just like gymnastics?
Gymnastic and exercises and formation of exercises and dances and all kinds of things.
I see. So you got checked out to move to America, and you were okay to move to America. Then what happened?
Well, we got married in October 8th, and then we thought that we didn't feel like we should go to the United States just before the holidays. We didn't like that. So we thought, well, then we go in February. And because in March the farm work started again. So then we had time to get settled, and then he was going to work for Mr. Hill in Adrian, and he was a co-sponsor for us. And so we went on the boat on the 19th of February, and it was the Rhine Dam. You can remember that by the name of Rhine Dam. It's spelled different. And so first we went to Le Havre, French, to pick up more passengers. Then we went to Southampton, England, to pick up more passengers. Then to Ireland, where we stayed in the bay because the ship was too big to go into the harbor. And the people came on board with a little boat, and then a rope ladder they climbed on board. And there were maybe 10 people or so that came on board in Ireland. But I was so seasick all the time. Every time when the boat started moving again, I got sick. And then as soon as we were in a harbor and the boat lay still, I was okay again. I seen land and I was okay. But then we were in Ireland. Ireland was beautiful. It was green and absolutely very nice. And I said to Opa, now what? Now we have to cross the ocean, and I'm so sick all the time. But I thought, well, by now maybe I'm used to it. Well, I wasn't, because it was on the weather forecast on the boat. They had a slate and they rode on the very rough sea. So I was sick all the time. And luckily, we had ordered somebody in the family told us that when you go on board, be sure and rent a deck chair, because if you're sick, at least you can lay in the deck chair. Because once you're sick, those chairs are gone. So we had that on a ticket that we were eligible for one deck chair. And so that's where I spend most of my time, in the fresh air, on a deck chair, with crackers and 7-Up and an apple. Because the food didn't stay down, and then they didn't have pills that time that you could take for seasickness. But finally, when we were about a day or a half ago from New York, I started to get better, and I could eat the delicious food that they had on board, and everything was wonderful. But then we were close to New York already. And first we had to go to Halifax to unload some immigrants that went to Canada. And then from Halifax we went down the coast to New York. And I seen the Statue of Liberty almost too late, because it went faster than I thought it was. And all of a sudden I said, oh, Statue of Liberty. And so we had to go outside and look. Beautiful sight to see it from the harbor. And then we came in New York, and you have to go through customs and through your immigrant papers and everything. And we had a trunk or a big crate where all our stuff was in, like our wedding gifts, our clothes, our childhood memories, chairs, two rattan chairs, and my sewing machine. And those trunks were all unloaded by the harbor, and they had to look into them. So they broke them open. The top it was just wood, a wooden crate. Opened it up, and he asked me what was in it, and I told him his wedding gifts and everything we owned was in that crate.
Was it like a Dutch guy that spoke Dutch?
No. He asked me a couple of things. I knew a little bit of English, not very much, but I knew what he wanted. And he got a little floor mat out. It was about like this. My mother gave me for my kitchen. And he said, what's that? And I put it on the ground, and I wiped my foot up. I said, that's what it is. That's it. But there was nothing. He just closed it shut with a hammer and nail. And then we had to wait for 3 months, because there was a harbor strike that started on that day. And it took 3 months before we got our stuff.
Did you leave without it? Did you go?
The crate, David, was as big as maybe from here to there. It was a big wooden crate.
Yeah.
About that high. And you could not take it with you on the train. They were going to ship it by railroad, and then it would come to Eastern Oregon. But it didn't come, and it didn't come, and it didn't come. So finally we rode a couple of times to the Holland America line, and they said, well, there's a harbor strike, there's nothing they can do, we have to wait, and it probably would be later. And then finally it came by train to Nissa, and we had to pick it up. And boy, that was a wonderful day. I still remember taking everything out, and everything was there.
You talked about the sponsorship program. What was that?
Well, you could only immigrate with if you had a sponsor, and it is mostly because there were a lot of people that came to the States and then they get in trouble or something, or they were convicts, and then it cost the United States a lot of money to take care of those people or to send them back. So they want to be sure that somebody was liable for you for the first 5 years that you were here. If something happened, they could fall back on them to deport you or to help you out. And it was Oma Klaas and Mr. Hill, the farmer where Opa worked for, who said, okay, they would do that. They would sponsor us. Otherwise, you couldn't get into the United States. You could get in, but only on a visa. And a visa is only for 2 years, and then you have to go back because you are not a permanent resident.
Yeah.
So we had a little green card, and so we were permanent residents. Then after 5 years, if you want to, you can become a citizen. But we waited till we were here 12 years because it seemed like we felt we didn't know English enough. You had to do a little exam when you were there. And I said, oh, I was either pregnant or something else. But finally, after 12 years, we said, oh, it's time to get, be an American citizen. So we got the books. Well, my brother was coming to the United States too, and we wanted to be responsible for him because it's hard to ask somebody else would you want to be responsible. But you can only be responsible if you are an American citizen. So then we went for some books to the immigration office in Boise, and they gave you some books to study, and you have to study them, and then you have to go back to one day. They give you a day, that day you're going to be questions with all kinds of questions. Who was the government and who is this and who is that? And you have to know the local government, a little bit of history of the United States. So some knowledge of the United States. And they want to see, or you could speak English very good, halfway decent anyway. And we did, and I really read that book over and over because I didn't want to fail it, and I have a phobia. If I have to do an exam, I get so nervous if I flunk. And so I thought, I have to know everything. And all of a sudden, that just asked me, who is the mayor of Parma? That wasn't in the book. But we lived there, so I knew who was the mayor. And they were, phew. That was the last question of me. But we made out. And then they had a special day for swearing in. And you have to bring 2 friends that know you really well, that you work with. And it couldn't be any of the relatives. It had to be somebody who had lived in the United States, born in the United States. And so we had some friends, the stamps, blue and mini stamps. They said they would do that for us. And so they went with us, and they got asked by the judge, oh, you're a good citizen, you're not in any trouble. So then we took them out for lunch, and and they had a swearing-in ceremony at the State House, and then we were citizens.
And when you got off in New York, you rode the train out, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
well, we came in New York, and then we had to go into a taxi because you had to go from the harbor to Grand Central Station in New York. But luckily, we had a friend or a boy that traveled with us on the boat who had lived in the United States for a couple of years. So he spoke good English, and he had to go back to Chicago. So he said, I can help you. We, the 3 of us, will go on the train. And then I'll put you on the train to to Oregon because you have to go on the Portland Road because I put down our tickets. So I remember on the train that there were, we didn't see very black people in Holland. Now there are, but after a while we didn't see too many enough. We didn't see a black person on life. It was something that was different. And when we I had my first hamburger in Chicago and the railroad restaurant. And they always thought it was so wonderful and so big. And when I had a completely different idea what a hamburger was. And it was just a piece of fried hamburger and a bun. I thought, well, is that it? But, and then they put us on the train. The boy who was with us, Tom. Yeah, and his sister said, I'll treat you to a lunch, And so she gave us lunch. And then put us on the train, so I said, I'm absolutely sure that you're going the right way. And we were on the way to Oregon. And at first it was beautiful. We went to Virginia and we seen the beautiful farms and white fences and everything. Virginia, I don't know, one of the eastern states. And, but then later, it was awful dry everywhere. And the last day when we traveled, we came to Wyoming, and it was nothing but snow and hardly no house in sight. And it was stopped by a little railroad station. There was one people on, one people off, and the train went again. I thought, man, alive, where are we going? So I said to my husband, do you think it's like that over in Oregon? He said, I don't know, never been there. So, but then we came at 12 o'clock at night. We came to the railroad station and raised Oma Klaas and Tante Ma, and the two girls were there. And we knew we had arrived and we were in safe hands, and from now on it would be better.
So how many days was it on the boat, and then how many days was it on the train?
A total of 2 weeks. It's 10 days on the boat,
and
it was about a day in New York when you had to go from the boat to the train station at night, and it was about 2 days, a little over 2 days on the train. 2.5. 2.5, something like that.
And you went to Oregon because Oma Klaas was there?
Yeah.
And that's why you decided to go to Oregon?
Yeah, right.
Okay, and so why did you decide to move to Idaho then?
Well, what was, we had Opa worked for Mr. Hill for a year and a half, about 2 years. And we kind of wanted to start a farm, but it's hard to start a farm if you don't have any money. And we didn't have much money. And so Oma Klaas had a farm that we rented, and rented that 50-50. That means everything split in half. The cream shack is split in half. The feed was split in half. Everything was split in half. So we thought, well, maybe Oma Klaas did it, so we thought we could do that too. And we did that. We did that for about 5 or 6 years, and then we rented the farm from him, which was better because then all the calves and everything was going to be ours. Otherwise, when 2 calves were born, 1 calf went to the owner, 1 calf went to us. So down the last 7 years, we rented over there, and it was a nice farm, but it was very lonesome over there because it was a house in the hills. I don't know if you ever seen it. I think you've seen it probably, but probably never have.
I saw the one in Parma.
Huh?
I saw the one in Parma. I don't know.
Yeah, well, it was way out in the hills over there. Coyotes, snakes, everything. And then the kind of were looking for a dairy farm, but there were all a lot of old dairy farms, but we kind of wanted something with a milk tank and, more modern. They're hard to find. And I remember one time we went to Vail, Oregon. There was a farm for sale way behind Vail, Oregon. Willow Creek. And we thought, we'll see what that is. Because not too many of them came for sale. And I looked around there, and there's nothing there, and just a farm. And I thought, if I have to live here, I'm not going to do it. So I didn't say anything to the farmer, and we were driving home, and Papa said, well, what do you think? Well, I said, what do I think? If you want to go there and just buy me a ticket because I'm going back. I'm not going to stay there. And he said, I think the same way. We don't like it over there. So we have to wait and see if we can find something else. And one day, Tom Ita's husband, called me and, oh no, wait a minute. So a guy from Beek told us, there is a farm in Parma. Maybe that would be something for you. I know a man there who is older, he's in his 60s, he wants to retire, but he still wants to stay on the place. Just go ahead and talk to him. So on a Sunday afternoon, we went over there, and we told him who we were, and he said, well, that might work. You know, we could live in the little hired man's house, we could bring our cows, and we could buy the rest of his cows, and we could buy the milk tank and the milk holder, and we had to take out a loan, but he would carry the papers. So that would be a good start. So we did that, and we lived for 9 years in Parma on the farm. Really enjoyed Parma. It was a nice. I remember my mother writing me. She said, "I finally got a real happy letter from you now that you moved, because I liked it. There were a lot of people around me there, and I belonged to some clubs and went to church over there, and yeah, we have real good memories of, and the people helped us a lot with the farm and everything. And Peter Ray, they looked like they had a pair of grandparents, because the boys were always, if they couldn't get anything done at our place, they would run over to pet him. Wait a minute, stop it. They got rice on the stove. Just put it away.
Yeah. No. You're in charge of that.
Where were we?
Let's see. So we moved to Idaho, and
We bought the house. We lived in Parma. In Parma, I've seen more people. I belonged to a group of ladies that was Veda Signify, and one lady there that I got good friends with was Carol Hartman. We went to painting classes. I had some painting classes in Parma already when boys were just about a year old, but I always wanted to do some painting. And I pursued that for a couple of years in Adrian and then quit. But in Parma, we went to a painting class and really enjoyed that. So we did some paintings, brought them to the fair, got a prize. We had a show from all the people. And I remember one old lady who was there, she said, when she was painting, her paintings never turned out just perfect. But she had her sister was painting with her too. And she said, Dale, if you move back, and if you move back far enough, it looks pretty darn good. Painting is, I haven't mentioned that, but it's something that I really like to do. Don't have much time for it. When we moved out of Parma, I had mixed feelings of moving out of Parma, because I really liked it there. It was just a little town like we were used to. The kids went to school over there. It was a good school system. At first, I remember Katie and Marianne going to school over there in August, and Papa and I were sitting on the front step waiting for the girls to come home because they could walk to school. And pretty soon they came walking down the road. And they walked into the driveway, and we were sitting there, and he said, "Now, how was school in Parma?" I don't like it. Because I didn't have any friends yet. And Katie too, she had all those girls in Adrian in school, and now she had to start all over. But that lasted about a week, and they had lots of friends, and later on that was no problem at all. They liked Parma too. They got active in scouts and 4-H and church and everything, and it was good in Parma. But we wanted to have, the main goal was we wanted to have our own farm, because we was coming close to the last payments over at the Stockton farm, so we thought, well, if we could just find one, then it was still getting harder to find a decent farm. And everybody knew that we were looking, and one day Eric Stam called and he said, I seen an ad in the paper about 40 acres in north of Colville. And he said, the realtor's number is in the paper, and he said, I thought of you, maybe that would be something. So I said, okay. So he gave me the phone number from the realtor, and I called, and it was a lady, Pearl Wickham. And I made an appointment for her at 2 o'clock. And so Papa came inside, and I said, we have an appointment this afternoon to look at the farm, so-and-so called, and let's give it a try. So when I talked to the lady, she said, where can I meet you? And I said, well, I don't know. I'm not too familiar with north of Colville. Well, she said, do you know the Sand Hollow Cafe? And I said, yeah, I know where that is. She said, okay, just meet me at the Sand Hollow Cafe, and I'll bring you to the farm. When we came there, when we came to the farm, I thought, well, it got possibilities. But the main thing, if the barn was all right, where he could milk, the cows and the tank and the stanchions and everything that belonged to it, it would be okay. We could do something to the houses of the houses. Not very clean inside, and it was white cinder block with a pink back door, yellow around the windows, and turquoise around the window, and yellow on the roof, and a blue roof. And it was a horrible combination. But I thought, well, we can always paint it. So. And when I looked inside, I thought, well, it'll be all right. And we already were approved for a farm home loan. And it is a special program for young farmers. And the interest rate was low.
5%.
5%. So we thought, well, and we were approved, so that wouldn't be so hard to get the loan. And so the lady said, he said, we talked a little bit about the two of us, and he said, well, let's do it. This looks like good. So she wrote up the earnest money. We gave her some earnest money, and we had a feeling we bought a farm. We had to go to the farm home administration to see if we could get the loan. They had to look at the farm, and when you have a loan with the government, it takes a long time. So we bought the farm really in November, and we got possession in March. So that meant the kids had to be moved to another school by the end of March, and then the cows had to move, all had to be moved over. We had to do a little bit of remodeling on the barn yet, and fences were all torn down. That all had to be done, but it all got taken care of, and we moved to Focus Ice Golf Course. Now, when we moved here, the road now is almost like a highway, but then it was just a little gravel road. And in the wintertime, there was a lot of water on the gravel road, because it's just mud all over the place. There were no houses there, and there were no houses on the north end of the golf course. And so we've been here now for 27 years, and things have been good.
Are you glad you moved to the United States?
Yes. Yeah, I wouldn't want to move back anymore. I like to go back for a visit, but too many people over there.
So what was it like being a housewife and helping around the farm?
Well, I think just like every other housewife, I've been a housewife before. I mean, you start out, and you will find out next on. You started out with a little bit, and it grows, and you work, and you go, and you do what you have to do. It's just being a housewife. I enjoyed it. I like being a housewife. But when the kids got older, like your mother got married, and the boys were getting about 13 or 14 years old, I thought maybe I can find me a job, just a little bit, just have some pocket money. because money on a dairy is always scarce. And so I applied for a secretary at the hospital, secretary for the kitchen department, in the food department. And I done that for about 2 years, and that was long enough. I worked about 3 days a week, or some 4, some 5, depends how big the demand was. But I wanted to do something that I always was interested in, like houses and real estate. And so I went, your mother was graduated from Boise State and was married. And she said, Mom, I like to take a real estate class at Boise State. So when I buy a house, I know something about it. Oh, I said, I would like to do that too. Well, I remember your mother and I, we were going to Boise State to get registered. And I thought, oh my God, I don't even have a high school diploma from here, How am I going to do that? And so your mother and I were filling in the paper, and once in a while I had asked a question. And she looked at my paper and said, you never had high school, because I put check mark there. And I said, but they don't know that. And she said, well, it's your gamble. So we had our class all written up, and she helped me. See, I always took her by the hand. Now she took me by the hand. We got to do this and we got to do that, because she went for 2 years to Boise State. So the first day came in September, and I was going to college now. And I went to college, and I with my daughter hand in hand. And so we went into the elevator and had to go upstairs, and there was a teacher talked about real estate. And oh my Lord, he used words I had never heard in my life. And I thought, I don't know about this. So I just tried to observe it, and it was so much I thought I'll never get through this. So we were in the elevator going down. There's another lady who was about my age. I said, how did you like that? Oh my gosh, she said, there's words I don't even suppose that's good, because I had the same thing. So after that we had to do an exam. My exam was not that great. I was going to have an exam. It's not good. But I thought, I think I'll go ahead and do this. So I talked to a friend who was in real estate, Chuck Corner. And he said, well, then you have to go to a real estate school and you have to take the classes. But I can help you with that. So he helped me with that, get me into a class. But all of a sudden, there I was. I could go and get my real estate license, but I had to have a GED. And I didn't have a GED. So I thought, well, no, we got to do that. So I called again, and they said, well, can you read well? I called Boise State. How bad can I get a GED? He said, just come in and we'll take an exam, and if you have lived here that long, and if you can read and everything, he said, I think you can make it. So I was just, out of the blue, I was going to take my GED. And I sat there, and the first thing was, I had some books to read, and I thought, oh yeah, that is okay, and I had my citizenship, so I knew something about the United States. I could fill all that in, and it was okay. And then, all of a sudden, in the afternoon, I got a math problem, a math paper. I thought, well, for heaven's sake, I never seen those numbers and signs and everything. I didn't know what it is. So, I just thought, well, I fill in some questions, but it's probably all wrong. So, I handed in my paper after half an hour, and then the teacher said, well, you've done this quick. I said, doesn't make any difference. He said, what do you mean doesn't make any difference? I said, I never had this in school. I went to...
All of those,
And yeah, I said, I went to school in the war in Holland, and I said, those last classes I had were not that great. I'd never seen this. And he said, well, good luck then. And so papers came back. I had to do that over again. And as I was doing it over, who am I going to call to help me? So I called one of the teachers in Parma who was head of Kenyon County Education. So I said, I need some help. And he said, okay. He said, you can redo this. He said, you just go to Nampa Nazarene College. And he said, I'll see to it that there is a paper there for you. And your name will be on there. I said, okay. So I went there, told him where I was, and she had an envelope, and there was paper with simple math and adding, dividing, subtractions. I thought, well, I could do that. So I did that, and that was okay. That grade was okay. Still didn't get my GED. So I called again and called the same guy, and I said, what's wrong with it? I said, I haven't got my GED yet. He said, did you do your government exam? I said, no. Well, I said, go back to Nampa, and he said, and ask for that and that book, and you read it through, and then you do your government exam. And if that is done, he said, then I think you can get your GED. So I had all that done, and then I got to get to the real estate classes. And that's then I'm almost ashamed that I think I failed that 4 or 5 times. Every time I did it again, it came back. And then sometime I thought I had a good feeling. I think it's right. But they had the multiple choice questions, and that is so hard if you have to do them in another language. Because 2 you could throw out.
Mm-hmm.
There's 2 that's almost the same, with a little different wording in it. And I thought, yeah, if that one is okay, I think. And then I wavered a little bit. No, I don't think it's right. Let's mark it out and do it. And then, of course, it would be wrong. So every time that envelope came, then I was scared to open it. And the last time, I thought, oh my God, please, Lord, let me get that. And I opened it up, and it said, congratulations. And I remember Papa coming in the house, and I left that envelope on the table, and it was open. He said, what? I said, no, again. No, sir. He said, oh my God, you failed it again. I said, yeah. I said, let me look at it. And he looked at it, he said, my holy cow, you made it this time. But I enjoyed my time at real estate. I had a wonderful boss that we had a small office, and we done lots of transactions, and we had lots of fun. And sometimes there were struggles, and the highs are so high and the lows are so low. Once you sold something and you had like a $800 or $1,000 commission, you oh boy. And then there would be a time for 2 months you wouldn't sell anything. You would sell something, but the loan, the people couldn't qualify for the loan, or they found a better house, and then no money. Lots of work, but no money. So, and I've done that for about 20 years. So, but then after that, it was time to retire.
So, what was it like when you gave birth to twins?
To twins?
Yeah,
I didn't know I was going to give birth to twins.
So, what were you thinking when that happened?
Well, I was pretty heavy in that last pregnancy, and the doctor said, the only thing the doctor said was, whenever you feel a labor pain, he said, you go to the hospital as soon as possible, because he said, this is your first child, and it goes faster than the first time. So I thought, he said, if Ray is in the field, he said, you use Ray with a tea towel or something, so he knows he has to come back. Well, the babies, the birth was at night, and all of a sudden it was time to go to the hospital. So we went to the hospital, barely made the hospital. I had the old Nissa hospital, it's not there anymore. But I had to go up the stairs, and I came to the counter, and the lady knew darn well that I was pretty close. So she said, put me in a room, and she called the doctor, and I can remember seeing Dr. Denford flying in that room with his shirt was loose, and he just threw off that shirt and put on his doctor's clothes, and he said, all of a sudden there was a baby coming, and I said, that was, oh, he said, that's wonderful. He said, you got a boy now. He said, wasn't that great? Be happy to have a boy. Yeah. And then he said, well, you need a couple of stitches, but then everything is okay. The boy is okay. And all of a sudden, I found the pain again. He said, what's that? And I said, I don't know. And you looked and said, oh my gosh, there's another one coming. Another one. And when Ray was born, he was a little bit too long in the birth canal, and he had some mucus in his throat. And when I looked at him, and then the nurse took him away, and I didn't know that. But I was so shocked. All of a sudden, I had I had 2 kids, and now I had 4. I doubled the amount. And I thought, man, how are we going to do this? I got one this and that. Just enough clothes left over from Katie and Marianne, and I don't know. But, you know, things happen. And the church ladies and Adrian, they had a big shower for me, and I had more clothes for those 2 kids as I ever had before. Everybody supported me and, you know, gave us clothes, and it was wonderful. But, huh? Oh yeah, and then we had an old Ringer type washing machine, and so Papa went to the garage and Adrian said, you sold this 40 years back. They sold, once in a while they sold them, he handles a little bit in stoves and refrigerators and appliances. And he said to Opa, he said, now you need a new washing machine and a dryer. And Opa said, yeah, but I don't have money. Then there's just 2 new babies, and I don't have money for a washing machine. Well, it wasn't 2 days later, and that man came in a brand new washing machine, and he unloaded it. He said, you know what? He said, you pay me when you have the money. You need a washing machine. And we just paid him every month so much, and they had a washing machine.
So what was it like when you sold the farm and it became real estate? The Hollandia estates. What did that feel like?
Yeah. Well, you know, there comes times that change, and the time that changed was we had modeled the dairy up to modern standards. We added on to the barn, we added loafing sheds and everything. People coming with us in the business, and everything was okay. But then the beef price went down, and the milk price went down. So there is a gap. You cannot make the payment. And you try.
Yeah, we did for a long time.
You know, we did for a long time. We hang on for dear life. But finally, it becomes such a stress that you say, well, but there is something, we have to do something. And we haggled with the bank, and the bank that we had our money from got bought by Key Bank in Boise. And in Boise, they wanted nothing to do. We went to the boss of a big building in Boise because we were not going to give up. But the man came from the east, from New York, and he didn't want nothing to do with dairy farms and farm business and everything. He was more into corporate business and all that. So he wasn't any help. And so we thought, well, the best thing is just to sell. So we sold the cows. And after the cows, and then we had some heifers left, and then we sold the heifers, or the other way around. And it was stressful, and you don't know what's going to happen. But we had the land by the golf course. If we would have had it somewhere else, we would have really been in deep trouble. But we had the land. We saved the farm. We paid the bank off because we had another 65 acres on the west side here, and we sold that. And there also, and we made some money on that, so we can pay the bank off. And we paid everybody off. The feed bill, everything was paid for. There's a little bit left. And then Ray and 2 cousins from Karma, the 3 of them got together, and those boys wanted to invest some money. We were lucky that happened because you need money somewhere, and those boys were willing to help. So, and Ray thought it would be a nice opportunity to do that. And so we sold the 15 acres over there to the company, and they're just about have it all built up. There's about 5 or 6 more lots left, and then it's built up. And once that is done, then they're probably going to start on that side. So we were lucky that we had this land by the golf course, because there's so many farmers that have to sell, and they can't sell the land either.
So were you sad that the farm had to go?
Well, it's something that you never hoped was going to happen, but when it happens, you got to take the good with the bad. And And that's what we did. And it was special, but it doesn't work.
This is Brian Laan on the 20th of March at about 11:30. Oh, but you don't have to answer anything you don't want to. You just, I don't want to answer that. Or if you want to move on, and like I said, I just want to have you tell me stories, basically. So, how much education did you receive?
I got grade school and agriculture school for 4 years.
What did you do in agricultural school?
Learning how to what kind of fertilizer to put on the fields and things like that, and all fancy stuff that really right now don't work so good anymore.
Did you learn like dairy farming and that?
Yeah, how to do cow sick or something, all that stuff. Yeah.
And how to give birth to a calf and all that?
No, we didn't do that. You learn that automatically.
With just working with other people?
Yeah.
Okay, and so you went, did you go through high school, like OMA, or did?
No, I didn't go to high school, grade school.
Grade school, and then
And then I was 13, I went 4 years to agriculture school. Only 2 days a week.
Okay, and
I got a diploma on that.
did you work on a farm on the other days?
Yeah, I was 13 years old, I started working for my neighbors. And I got to be there at 4:30 in the morning, milk 6 cows by hand, and then in the evenings too, and every day.
How long did it take you to milk that cow?
About 6 cows is a little over an hour. So you can milk about 6 cows an hour. And that was pretty good. And milking, of course. No milking at that time.
So what was it like growing up in Holland?
I enjoyed every minute of it. I was always in sport and gymnastics, and I loved to play soccer. And I did long distance running, athletics.
Didn't you also do ice skating?
In ice skating, I got medals from that too. Speed skating, mostly speed skating. And long distance skating too. 100 kilometers or 150 kilometers in a day.
How long did that take?
It takes about 5 hours. And if you went with an whole group, Holland, you can keep on skating.
Right.
Dus once in a while you got to watch the other, you don't need a bridge. Because that's big.
So were you on like a club team?
No, not with ice skating. I ice skated. I was in the team from the agriculture school, and we ice skate against the other schools just for medals, not for money or nothing.
Right.
There was no money involved that time. Sports is big now. Everything is sports now.
And soccer, you were on a club team, right?
Yeah.
What?
And then once every other week, you got to, before you play, you got to go. You get 3 or 4 boys got to go to the field to fix the field to the lines down. Take the sheep manure off. There was always sheep on the soccer field, and we got to take all the sheep manure off. And then hang the nets up on the goalies. We got no people doing that. We did that all ourselves.
Now, was the club team with the agricultural school?
No, just in club in the village where I live.
In Horn?
Yeah. No, in Horn at that time it was Howard. The little tiny village. Later on I went to Horn, that was a city from 1.5 million people about. And then I played in soccer there too.
And that was like the city's club team?
Yeah. No, not from the city. Ook all people, you pay so much amount to be in soccer.
Okay.
The soccer team, and they got the president and everything.
Oh, okay.
But nobody made money in it. They take money in from the people who came over to watch. Only from the first team, not from the, everybody played soccer. The big guys, the little guys. And I started out in the Esperance, so I don't know what you call it. And then I went to juniors, and then I finally went to the big boys.
Okay. And is that club team, like, what is that in relation to, like, Ajax and Feyenoord?
All that club team was a lot less. Ajax is the best.
But like, how much less? Like, was there divisions?
Oh yeah, different classes, yeah.
And
And if you played good enough, you got good players. Nobody got paid that time. Now they got professionals. And if the club was good enough, and you were part to get out on top, you can. If you get better, you can get up higher and higher. You know, but a club I always remember when we never got higher.
okay,
Now we always played. It was always about if they played a team. I was not in the first team either. I was in the first team. I always draws about 4,000 people. But I was pretty good people came over and they took care of they brought the money in.
and you weren't on the first team. You were on the.
No. I played with it a couple times. I was not that good. I was a little over average. But I enjoyed it just as much as the other guys did. And every Sunday played only on Sundays. And every night he was on the soccer field practicing and running around and yeah.
So
That's what I missed as I came to the United States. There was no soccer here. And it was that bothers me the most. That there was no soccer. Just baseball and football. And I tried baseball and I didn't like it at all because I couldn't hit the ball. I couldn't hit the ball.
so when did you meet Oma? Alida.
In 1953, I just came back from Indonesia. I was 2 years in the Dutch Army. 1949 till 51 I was in Indonesia, the island of Java, mostly Jakarta and Semarang. And I came back and I worked for my friend that was called Force. And then Sunday we went out dancing. He went dancing with him and he got a girlfriend and I went with him and then I met Oma too.
Okay.
I was 2 years in Indonesia and I really enjoyed it. My father said, don't go there because maybe you kill you there and shoot it. Well, there was still a little while ago. Well, I said, I gotta go. Well, I said, take the gun and put it on top of your foot and shoot a hole in your feet. You don't have to go. So you shoot a hole in your feet. I never forgot that too.
So what was your wedding like?
No, not very kind of simple. First you gotta go to the city hall and then we went to for the mayor of this in the church because my wife was go to church. She was Sunday school teacher. And then we got a reception after that and that was it. And then before I went to the United States, I stayed home with my wife folks and my wife then stayed home with her folks. And then we met on weekends.
So how long was it? It was like 4 or 5 months that you guys were married and living not.
No, I was married in October 8th, 1953. We left in February of 54.
So all that time you were living in
By the
different
time we came
houses.
together on the bicycle, got no cars. Nobody got a car. Only people who got a car was the mayor and the lawyers and a really rich fireman. There's like 3 or 4 people in the village with all this. Not much traffic.
And so you were in the Dutch army.
Yeah.
And
And then,
were you
well, before
drafted or did you sign up?
no, you got to be drafted. Nobody signed up there. Now they do. And before I went to Indonesia, of course, we went to the World War II.
Mm-hmm.
And I lived right by a big water tower there, and they got a radar on there. And every time the American planes took off from England, and then that radar stopped turning right away, and about an hour later on, 45 minutes, they was there. And you can lay on your back and you can count planes so long as you want to. Always flying in V shape. And you got we laid on our back, we count 100 here and 100 there, was somewhere 300-400 in the air. And the cups from Oma is always rattling on top of the table, that much noise. But every plane got 4 engines. And at one time 2 collided right over our house, and one came tumbling down like this, and one of them dove right in front of the house in the dirt. And I was in the field and I found 2 pilots. And
didn't you also find out?
and found a bomb.
Yeah.
And the Germans was there, and they put a rope on it, and I got to pull it out with my horse. I was only 13 and 14. And the pilot, I still can see the face. Well, I was in red, wavy hair he got. But if you're 13,
Were they English?
they were Americans.
American.
But nowadays I took the stuff out of the pockets so you can give to the parents. Now the Germans got it. But I never thought, I was afraid of dead people if you're 13 years old, because that's quite a sight. And there was one punchy dead ones laying in the plane still. And but that was a different time. I'm glad that's over. And people are still fighting. They never stop. Kill them, kill them, kill them.
So were you in the army during the war?
No.
No.
I was 13.
Okay.
I went in the Dutch army that was 19.
Okay. Didn't the plane also crash in your soccer field?
No, and there was a bomb one time.
Yeah, where did the bomb
I
land?
was playing soccer, practicing
Uh-huh.
in that little village, and the ball rolled to the other goalie, and there was a little round thing in the top thing there, top from the goalie. And I got a ball in, and I saw there was a big hole in the ground there too. And I called the other kids, and boy, we got shovels, and we digged a bomb out there. And we didn't know what bomb was. We were 13, 14 years old. And we got a thing on the ground, and the Germans got a hold. They came over, and they crawled on the bellies and on the knees over there to that bomb, and we pure food on the ground. And the next day, it was in the Dutch paper, the people, kids from Howard, the place, played with the lives. Well, we didn't know they did die from bombs.
Yeah.
We didn't know what bombs was up in the beginning. Later I know what it was. But I saw more of them than in the beginning. And I thought 2 years ago that I was going to the guy who was with me, and they all remember that here too. That was it.
So what was it like living in occupied home?
Well, in the beginning it didn't, you're young, and you see the Germans, you didn't like them, but you didn't know what you can do about it. And there was a lot of people that was fighting on the ground, and there was a lot of people who went with the Germans, we call them traitors, and they are traitors. There was always people who didn't amount to nothing. And then the Germans gave them a gun, and they gave them a uniform, and they thought they were the boss, And the underground fought them all the time. And we got, the last time of the last days of the war, there was a lot of people from Amsterdam that came with bicycles and everything to farm to get something to eat. And I saw people eating tulips and eating sugar beets because it's all they got. And they came to the farms and tried to get some potatoes and that was hard because the farmers all got nothing to eat. The Germans stole everything away.
Did they come to your farms and try to eat?
And my mother gave them sometimes to eat too. You're in a farm, you always got something.
So you helped them out?
Yeah, a lot of them we did, yeah.
Did you have any underground people like Oma?
Well, my brother, Derek, was on the ground. He got to go to Germany, he didn't go. And then he got a hole in the ceiling, and then something showed up. And he crawled over there, and he stayed there. And there was always one neighbor over there, he sold in Dutch paper, but that was for the Germans. And the dad bought it on purpose, so that they think, hey, that guy with the Germans. And then that happened. we never got. And then one time we got light on the outside, and all the lights got to be covered up, that nothing can come out the house lights. And then one time my dad pulled the wrong switch, and the outside lights are down. And then pretty soon the Germans there, we can shoot out the lights. And that guy was a pretty nice guy. I said, we can shoot out the lights, and we just told you that, and they turned the lights off. And that German soldier came over quite often, because he was a dairy farmer in Germany, and he wanted to go home too. And he stayed with the cows first. He was a very nice guy. They're a nice guy, but not too, some of them nasty, some.
Didn't Klaus, didn't he have to go to like a work camp?
Almost Klaus.
Yeah, almost Klaus.
Well, he was in France already, that he was before the war started. And he was 3 years and 10 months in France, and the Germans came to France, and they say you got to be 4 years in France if you can stay here, and they picked him up and they put him in a camp, and then he can choose to go work on a farm in Germany. And he wanted to get out of that camp, because all they got was Rudebeker soup, he didn't like, and there was nothing to eat, and then he started working on a farm in Schleswig-Holstein. That is between Germany and Denmark there. And then he can go home, and they kept money from him and everything, and he can go home to visit his folks. And he never went back.
Yeah.
He kept his stuff there. And he never got much trouble with the Germans for the rest. My neighbors, he was on a bicycle, and he was the deaf guy. He didn't hear very good. And they stopped him for something, and they let him go. Then they called him back, and he kept on pedaling, and he just shot him in the back and killed him. I know that. But that was. And I saw an English pilot one time that picked him up from somewhere, and just shoved him out of the car in the hospital, and he was crippled. And they pushed him on the chairs in German, and I was on a bicycle. He fell down, and they picked him up, and that's all. I didn't see that much.
Didn't Oma Divic with a nice car, didn't his dad and brother get shot right in front of him?
Oma Divic?
Yeah.
Oh no, no. A guy got shot. He was by the barber. He was a Dutch who worked with the Germans. He was a Dutchman. He was sitting by the barber, and a couple of underground guys walked in there. They killed the guys in the barber chair. And then the next day, the Germans came with 6 kids, and they put them against the wall, against by the church wall, and they lined them up, and they put a middle here, and that kid was hollering for his mother. He was about 89, and he just mowed him down. That is still there. You still can see the dents on the church over there. And I didn't see that.
Yeah.
But I know what happened there, and every time I go to Holland, take a look there.
Didn't you go to Normandy Beach on one trip back?
But that was in, what is it now? It is
It was last trip, wasn't it?
2 years ago.
What did that feel like?
Well, you get emotional. See how many people died there, sometimes I think for nothing. That, if they didn't do it, the Germany was probably all over their head. But to go to Normandy, it is quite thing. I saw the Battle of the Bulge, and everything was emotional too.
You went to the battlefield of the...
Yeah, went to the battlefield with Oman, and I really enjoyed watching that. But a lot of people died there too.
So you got married to Oma, and what was it like getting ready to go to America, and why did you decide to go there?
I always told Oma, I'd rather be in little bars than a big hired men. And I went to the United States, and I was hoping I could do something. I was not lazy, and I could work. And I got a right away job. My brother made it that I worked for Mr. Hill. never drove a tractor, and they put a tractor on the yard, and he was running already. I say, you go culti pack that hayfield. I didn't know what culti pack was. I didn't know drove on the tractor, and the tractor was standing there, and I said, sit down on it. And I sit down, and I said, what I got to do now? Who the handle for was? And I did, and they bore there in the tractor, and I was sitting like this, a little John Deere beat. And then, finally get used out irrigating was first for me, what you have to do. There was some precise over there with that hay, middag later. I didn't know that.
What was it like though when you were getting ready to immigrate to Holland, like getting checked out and getting your paperwork ready and stuff like that?
Oh, that's quite a difference. Right now they come from all over the world. They come to the United States and off in the United States, and that we went for, you got to go through a lot of paperwork, and they want to know you got no, we call it sickness, everything. You got to be healthy. Mostly you're afraid of PD and all that stuff that time. You don't bring that to the United States and all that stuff. There's a lot of,
So what was
but the American people, a lot of American people to me, very, very good. Very nice. And I was 2 years ago in Holland, and a friend of me, he was all over the world. He said, ever been in the United States? He said, no, and I'm not going there either. I said, why not? I said, I think I know this country. He said, how you can say that? You've never been there. As well as I know it. He said, you're wrong. Now I walked away from, I don't know what that is. But if somebody in the United States tells something bad about the Netherlands, I get mad too. But if people in Holland say something bad about the United States, same way. But there's people in Europe know a lot more about Americans than a lot of Americans know about America. I don't know what that is, but I think a lot of people here think the States start in New York and end by Los Angeles. They don't know, a lot of kids don't know what goes on outside the United States.
Yeah.
They didn't know what the United States.
So what was
But I don't want to go back, and I love to visit. I don't want to live there anymore. It's too crowded.
So what was the boat ride like coming over?
The boat ride to me was not so bad. I already was 21 days on the Dutch cruise ship going to Indonesia, into the Suez Canal and in the ocean, the Red Sea. And I got sick once. A few years left Rotterdam. I threw up. And then the trip to America, I never got sick. And they got good food, and I said, man, I eat all day off. And Oma was sick. And I know we got, but he left. He came in the cabin, a nice cabin, and there was, my uncle sent us flowers in the vase to us. And they were standing there on the table, and the boat took off, and the tulip was going like this all the time. And Oma got sick of it. Throw the tulips out. But it was very rough sea, and man, that boat, that once shakes and everything, the screw came up above the water or something. Man, I don't like water. It's too much of it.
So what was the train ride like?
The train ride, looked pretty nice. And my brother, Klaas, told me, I said, don't buy nothing on the train, too expensive. But I was in that train for 3 days and 3 nights. By God, I got hungry, and I want to order something, but they had the language. I didn't understand the word in the restaurant. People eating ham and eggs, and I just pointed at it. And I got it too, and it tasted pretty damn good. Oh my God, it too. But my brother said, don't eat on the train, it costs too much. 3 days, 3 nights without food, that is kind of, you get hungry then.
Yeah. I forgot to ask you, so what did you do in Indonesia during the war?
Mostly guard duties. And there was that we were there, the war was just about over. Or it was really over. And we mostly got to stand guard and the troops went back already. We met troops that we went over, the troops came back already from Indonesia. In Indonesia is a beautiful country, when they got trouble over there too. And I enjoyed that I was there. I played a lot of soccer there. Everybody was playing in a lot of ping pong and a lot of volleyball. And I'm glad I landed. I enjoyed it.
So basically, you just had this guard.
Garbage. Yeah. And one time, me and my friends, I was too even fell asleep as we were guard. And obviously we woke up and the guy was running like crazy, past us. It was longer in the knee. And friends said, there goes somebody. Yeah, it's a shooter. I said, no, I don't. He said, I don't either. And the next morning, they stole everything out of the building he was guarding. They got guns and everything. Stole everything. And that guy was one of them. I never shot a guy in my life, and I didn't want to shoot him either.
So did you guys get in trouble for that?
Well, we talked about exactly what we were going to say. We did a good job because we never got in trouble. We never say we were asleep. We never say we shot a guy. And it all worked out perfect. I never forgot it. Oh, I love a military guy. Yeah. And now I'm living in the United States. I'm a golf coach. I know I act for a lot of people, and I play Monday, I play bridge. What I like to do, I'm not too good at it, but I think I'm about average. I enjoy doing it and keep my brains going a little bit.
And you moved to Oregon because your brother was there,
Yeah.
and that's where you were sponsored.
Yeah.
And so, what was it like working on Mr. Hill's farm?
Well, that was a tip-top pattern. Everything has got to be exactly right. You know, I learned a lot from the guy. And we are still friends with his son, who is 80 now. And he was one of the better guys. A real nice fellow. And I always enjoyed it. But 2 years was enough, I think, if I was a hired man. And he was still staying on. You know, I want to be a little tiny boss. You know, everything went okay till the down the left here. After the years, we modeled everything. That works too. But that we really turned out to be lucky for us. That it happened. At that time, sometimes you can sleep at night. You think about how in the world we do that.
And
But
so,
now I am doing this, and now I enjoy life a little. I always did enjoy life. Now I don't want to die yet either. You never know with that.
so what was owning your own farm like? I mean,
Well,
first you rented, and then you rented half and half, and then you rented your own farm. What was that like?
50-50 deal. And I bought the tractor. I got money from a Dutch friend. I bought a tractor, a mower, and a plow for $1,500. And they bought on plowing, you know. I all put new oil in the tractor, all the oil was gone. Right away, you got to go to the shop. And that guy, that was the first screw we got from the American. That was the last one too. I got my But he was paying for that a little bit. And the guy fixed it up, the dealership, and they told me you pay where you got the money. That's it. And then on the plow and the tractor and mower, I thought that we were going to do good. And we did, and I enjoy life just living in the hills, man. You know, you got to go a little farther every step, try to get a little life more and more.
So, I didn't ask Alma, but how did you guys learn English?
English, mostly from the first time I came here, there were two boys here, neighbor boys, they were little small kids, and they talked fluently English. And I didn't understand the word, all they were quoting me. I didn't understand the word they're saying. No, that makes me mad. And then, well, we learned. on television. I bought a television pretty quick. You learn on the radio, and when other people listen. And I still got a hell of an accent. Everybody tells me that, but I understand everything. That's the main thing for me. And I read the paper. I got no trouble reading it and everything. Mine.
So mostly from you guys bought a TV right off the bat?
No, I do the bed and all that took a while. And I was
We had the radio.
a radio always. Mostly from learning, and you get Saturday we went to the store in Adrian, and there was a bunch of farmers there, and they all standing around the pot belly stove there. That was still pot. And that lady did the shopping. The first car I bought was a Fleetline Chevrolet, and all my class paid for it because I did have the money for almost $50. I paid it back, very slow back. I got a driver's license. I got to go over there to do it. But I can read English either. The ground the world I filled that out. I don't know what it says, but then I looked across the table. There was another guy who got the same piece of paper. It was all different, but he got the same. And I did exactly what he did. I used to pick those, and the last three I did by myself. And they were all three wrong, but the rest was all okay. I got the driver's license. I want to drive the beat truck. You know, that's what I did. That's the way I felt to do.
So you got an endorsement to drive the beat truck, or
Everything. I can drive the beat truck, you know, in the car. And the first couple of weeks, Mr. Hill gave me an old pickup on the farm. I live about 3 miles away. And I can drive that old pickup over there. He did it without license because I didn't have it. He might be like nobody did anyway.
yeah.
And yeah, boy, I felt pretty big to drive one. I got my driver's license in Holland, but it was no good over here.
So what did it feel like when you became an American citizen? How did that feel?
Well, first thing, you don't have to go to the post office on the 1st of January to tell you you're still here, and you always got to give your name over the 1st of January, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I know then for sure that they stayed here, and I used to be an American citizen, so I can vote. And I never missed the vote once. I would vote all the time. And it's pretty much the farmers I work with, is the farmers got to make money, we got to have a democratic president. And I'm not completely, I don't believe in that too much. I think I mostly vote for mostly I vote for the people, I think. I vote for Democrat too. For the person, I mostly vote for the person, I think is the best.
So what was it like to take the citizenship test and
No,
do all that?
that was not very difficult. Because in 12 years, I understand the most. And he did that one trick question, who's the mayor of Parma. He lived in Parma.
Uh-huh.
But that was not trick to me because I happened to know the guy. I mean, I don't remember the questions anymore. That's so long ago, man, oh man. It was in the voice in the picture in the paper later, and all the people, I still got it somewhere. That's quite a deal. You're so good as the other people here.
And so you're glad that you moved to the United States?
Oh, yeah. And if you go back to Holland now, it is a third of Idaho, and right now there live 16 million people. It is very hard to, and all the dairy farmers moving out of here. Moving to Canada, they're moving to America, and a lot of them in Texas and Washington and California, and a lot of them in Canada.
Back to dairy farming. How did dairy farming in Holland differ from the United States? Besides the technology.
For me, it was a lot different because I never milked a milk machine in my life. It was all hand milking. And we went to the field with the cow guys with a rowboat with 3 or 4 milk cans and we strained it, and my brother and my father. And we went there and used where the cow was. He was walking. We sit down and the cow stays still, put a rope around his legs, and we milk, rain or shine. Sometimes rain like heck, and he got dead like heck too.
Did you put the rope around his leg so it didn't kick you in the face?
Yeah, so he don't walk away.
Oh, okay.
And sometimes if it's really the wind and the rain, if you put a cow with his face in the wind, then the foam didn't blow off your milk. But if it rained too hard, he didn't want to go with his face in the rain. He wanted to go with his behind in the rain. And you were sitting in the pour that foam blow all over and you got so darn wet and cold. You want to go row because then you can, well, you were doing something to the rowboat.
So the main difference was that you went with the rowboat instead of, and the milking machine, stuff like that.
No, not milk machine.
Well, no milking machines in
And
the
then I
States.
came over here. First 2 years I did a farm. My brother was on that farm, and I went after I was with Mr. Hill. Then I went evening, go there and help him milk once in a while, my brother. And that's why I learned the milk machines a little bit. And then you see the milk machines now.
So you worked with Mr. Hill during the day and helped on the cross in the night.
I was through at 6 o'clock in the evening with Mr. Hill.
Uh-huh.
And sometimes we got to go to the water after the supper. And then I didn't go to class. Sometimes we go in the evening went to class and he was still milking, and I helped him feed the calves or something. And I tried to drill grain for a while late in the evening. The first time I turned around to the tractor, I hit the tires of the machine and even the tire was clear. I turned too close. I was not a tractor driver yet.
Did you ever have hired hands on your farm? When you finally got a farm, did you hire help?
Yeah, one of them over here was that Peter David built in school.
Mm-hmm.
And always did milk in Panama and milk. 10 years in a row without one day off. Sometimes we went, one time I didn't go to bed all, we went to the party. And years from the party, go milk again, never went to bed. Yeah. Get the fortune hard, maybe.
So you only hired one guy, and that was a friend of Pete and Ray.
No, he was an older guy. Ray went to school in Moscow. And Pete, well, he got to go. He went to school more than me, but this Pete, he was here too. But if he got just Pete and me, you never get a day off. And then he got a hired man and he milk for us once in a while too. Then all the cows too. Then one of us can get off. But in Panama, I've never got off. 10 years in a row, 1,000 days till I got kidney stones. Then you got to get off.
So how did Mom and Marianne and Pete and Ray and Oma help on the farm?
Well, that was Katie, your mother then. She always hang the milk machines up before I start milking. And she cleaned the bottom after milking. Or mostly she cleaned the bottom after milking in the evenings, And Marianne, she got to make supper ready. And Peter Ray helped Oma feed the calves and things like that. Because they were doing a real small bit. And Oma always fed the calves over here. And then Peter Ray was over here too. Peter and two. They always came home with Christmas like you. But and Ray was always a quick, he was only jumping a tractor. He always doing something. He liked to drive tractor and he didn't like how he was.
So when Ray came back, he just did the field work and stuff like that?
Yeah, well, we did between milking,
Right.
Daytime. He got these 65 acres over there. He mostly got the hay in a couple of times in the streets. Now then, the out sometimes with potatoes.
And
yeah, go ahead.
And Pete and Ray helped when they grew up. They helped you with the farm, milking the cows and stuff like that.
Well, Ray went to college, and after college, he got a job there, and a good job too. And Pete stayed here. He wanted to be in dairy farm. He got married, and then he didn't show up so much in the morning. He came late and later. I don't know why. He didn't like it anymore. Then I didn't know what to do. Because you can't do it by yourself either.
Right.
Then I got a lot of men. But Well, Pete right away got a mower. You know, he was my custom swathing. He got a swather from even a guy, Mountain View now. I say, I gave him a swather, he got no money. I gave him the swather and he paid me so much an acre. That way he started in the business. Paid him every month so much for so many acres he mowed. I don't remember how much it was. Every off taught him how to mow.
And so now
Now I do it.
first pocket money, right?
Yeah.
Um,
I get maybe $1,000 a year from it.
so what did it feel like when you finally sold the farm?
Well, the solar farm, not so bad when the cows left us. I was a little emotional. We got about 150 cows in, and then they went to the neighbor, he was a little farther away, and I got a good price for it. It was all nice. And, the last 2 years of the dairy farm was so bad, and a lot of people quit it. I was wondering if the bank where I was in, they were real good to me, and they told me to remodel, and things sold out because they went broke themselves. Then I lost it. That was Pleasant Valley Bank. Shoot. And then, if your cream stick is smaller than the money you gotta pay out on grain and hay and everything, then you don't go to very good. But that is all over behind me. I still think about it.
Do you miss milking the cows?
I don't miss, no, I don't miss. But I really got some animals. And I told one home, I said, I put these on llamas on or something. Oh man, he jumps over the thing. Just for the feed, you know, I feed the squirrel, that's all I do now.
Yeah.
And I like that some animals around. Even if Pete got a horse, he never use it. And then, I think that's nice. You go to, and better know, I like horses too. I always just like horses. Pete said that winter this, the ice tank was frozen. And the horse came over and he took his leg and he put his legs in, he went like this and he broke the ice so he could drink. That did the horse himself. I think that is pretty nice. But I live in a nice house now and I don't want, Ray told me to build a new house here and sell this. And I almost said no, and I said no, I like it here. And then you see all the trips he got in the basement. I mean, you can't move anymore, man. You need a bigger house. But as the way it goes, you know, I live in a place nobody ever moves in front of me. I live in a golf course. Got nice neighbors.
When you moved in, was the golf course here?
Yeah. Well, these three, that makes no difference. But three over here, the kids jumped over Peter Ray, the big one.
Yeah.
The trees was about, this tree is a lot bigger now than they were there before mine was. Something.
And so now you watch soccer on TV and play bridge.
Right? Right. And the soccer game started in 5 minutes.
In 5 minutes?
Yeah.
Sounds like we better finish the interview.
Oh, I got time to.
Is it?
If you want to know some more, I don't know what to say about.
I'm done, unless you want to say something else.
Well, I'm glad I live in the United States and the American people to meet and all of them good. And all the kids doing good and what else you want. Yeah, I think.